right, good morning. Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. You are watching Morning Live. We're about to get into the conversation this morning. We'll take a look at what is happening between the head of state and his deputy, or at least if not them, then the allies. What exactly is brewing this, political fallout, if there is any, as well as what Ruto brings back from America, some of the goodies that he jetted back in the country with. What do they mean? How significant are they to the Kenyan people first? Before we can now talk about, what it means to Africa or the East African nation. So that is the conversation this morning. Feel free to talk to us across our social media platforms. Our SMS lines are open. Thoughts, questions, comments that you may have, we'll be happily sampling them just before we conclude. So let me introduce my guest in studio this morning. On my immediate right, I'm joined by Muito Mureithi, who's a political analyst and commentator. Asante sana for coming in this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
And next to him is John Kinuthia, who's a leadership and governance expert. Asante sana, John.
Karibu.
All right, so gentlemen, let's just kick it off from what is happening just within the country, and that has got to do with the president, William Ruto, and his deputy, Rigathi Gachagua, or at least if not them, the allies, what they keep on talking about. And the best way to start this conversation is to understand how we got here. This is a union, I'd call it, that, gave hope to a lot of Kenyans in 2022 with the Hustler initiative. They came into office, one is a truthful man, the other one is son of a peasant farmer. And a lot of Kenyans will perhaps, relate and see themselves through them. But here we are about 1 year later, or at least almost 2 years, down the line. Here we are having a conversation around a political fallout. Muito, from where you sit, where did this start from? Is it just about 2027 or 2032 contest, or did it start way back from the National Dialogue Committee report, where Gachagua expressed his reservations about that particular team and the report itself? So how did we find ourselves in this position?
Well, thank you once again. Today's politics, like I always say, is so dynamic. And within the strategy of any political camp, political marriages, political relationships are always as a result of certain conveniences. And each one comes to the table with their interests at hand as their ace card, which is usually dropped after you've already accomplished what you wanted.
Yeah.
The current president, His Excellency Dr. William Ruto, had an interest of, inheriting the position of presidency from Uhuru Kenyatta. And that was the deal, that was the agreement in 2012. And they stood to it until 2017 and 2018, the fallout came around. This is when I think the awakening of the former president Uhuru Kenyatta felt that it's time. I think the short time for me to, be in this situation of, push and shove politically. And he felt that it's time that he should try and deliver on his own development agenda and whatever plans that he had that he would accomplish while still the president. And so he started creating the alliances so that at least he can calm down the tone. Unfortunately, it's the opposition led by the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, who was then the thorn in the flesh. And same thing come 2022 elections. You saw the riots and chaos that actually extended all the way throughout the whole year. The first year. And there was no business, really meaningful business that was taking place within government. And so His Excellency the President, having realized that 1 year is now down, he has 4 years or less to implement his development agenda and also his plans for the interest and the benefit of Kenyans. Because everybody goes there for the interest and the benefit of Kenyans, I presume. And he had this in mind. And so he knows that time is short. And so he had also had to take the same course that really bashed him when he was the deputy president. Today the culprit is, the person who is now suffering is in the same position he was in, using similar tactics, inviting the opposition into government, that is into his space, not into government, but into his space. And that way it was easy now for the deputy president to begin to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing that happened to him in 2018. Although he swore that none of his deputies, if he would ever have many, if one, maybe Gachagua, since they were being sworn in around that time, he said that he would not allow such a thing to happen to his deputy. And for a short while, we have seen a government that is working, you know, with a good common understanding. But you know, politics, you don't go it alone. The other people who also have their interest, and they're the ones who actually supported you in your politics. And also from now His Excellency the President's backyard, there were people who supported him, and not only morally and with their votes, but even financially. Same thing with the person representing this other side, the Deputy President. The might is not only in the voters' support, but also financial and these kind of things. Because doing campaigns is an expensive venture. And by that time, when they were looking at things from that kind of perspective, that was the situation. But now, having come over 1.5 years now, there's some people who feel that, hey, things have now come to where we wanted, home to roost, and so let's do this. It's time we now begin to demarcate our territory.
Yeah. And
this is what is happening. It's not a bluff. It's not propaganda. It's a reality. They must start to ensure that, hey, we have the president with us, so we must be felt as the team leading, and the other side must be subordinate somewhat. Yeah. So this is the kind of politics that is happening within the space of government, and so that influence is what you're seeing right now. Secondly, another factor that is contributing to it, when you know that your ground, your campaigner, and especially your chief campaigner, is perceived to have a ground, I mean to hold your ground, or have influence on a sizable ground of support, the best thing is to make sure that you kind of reduce his influence. Yeah. And having Mount Kenya voted for him 47%, definitely he would feel like, if I would split, and I'm including now the president, because he does not speak it openly, neither will Gachagua speak it openly. He won't allow himself to speak openly. But the likes of his supporters will actually say what he has in mind and what he has in his heart. The same thing is happening. What the president has in mind and what he has in his heart is actually spoken out by the likes of Sudi and the like. Then you go to the other side, you Kimani Mujiri, whoever, every other person, they will all speak for the benefit of, you know, maintaining control of the space that they bargained for. So that is why you're seeing the tussle between the two camps. Yeah. Like we always say in my native language, is that two axes in one basket will always knock each other and create some cranking sound, and that is what we're hearing right now. Right. However, in the process, you're able to deal with the sound by maybe cushioning and maybe setting some boundaries. Yeah. And I believe the person to crack the whip is His Excellency the President, Dr. William Ruto. Yeah. If he does it against Gachagua, regarding Gachagua, the Deputy President, biasedly, I mean with bias, definitely there is going to be some repercussion politically. Okay. Yeah. If he does it in favor of his other side, then it will still have its own repercussions. So what we are waiting for is to hear what the president has to say concerning this openly, because he stayed mum, and I'm hoping that during the Madaraka celebrations he might make some declaration, because I do believe that even them, they know the timelines, and that's why they are aggravating this kind of this tussle, so that the president can speak during a national event where every Kenyan is listening, because each one of them would like their supporters to hear. And on such national holidays, definitely the president, if if he speaks, then everybody's going to, you know, catch up with the current.
All right. Kenneth, here, from a leadership point of view, one would argue the reason why we are seeing this kind of reaction from the Deputy President regarding Gachagua is because once bitten, twice shy. He's seen what happened to, you know, the then Deputy President William Ruto in the Ruto fallout, and he's making careful steps to ensure that he does not find himself in the same position. But does it justify some of the claims he's making now and telling Rift Valley leaders, you know, do not engage in Mount Kenya politics? Does it justify that?
So from where I sit, one, they are breaking a lot of rules of leadership. The first one, which is unfortunate, there's the issue of divide and conquer. People always think divide and conquer is imposed on you from outside by manipulating third party, but you can also divide and conquer yourselves. A clear lesson was learned during those days, because when the former president, His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, was deemed to even anticipate not keeping his word vis-a-vis the then deputy president, who is now the current president, even his own backyard rose up in arms and said no, you know. And if people could learn lessons, they would just look back in retrospect, because it's not too long ago what exactly happened. And it went so downhill, and you know, it went south to the extent that the underdog prevailed. That's number one. The second aspect is that this is the last thing that Kenyans need at this moment. In leadership, whether you're talking about civil or civilian leadership, even in the military, they call it unity of command. There's an important aspect of leaders bringing people together. So when they seemed to be clashing like they are, it starts creating an environment where people start taking sides, and it's very polarizing. I'll give you an example. You saw recently now there are even fights between MPs and MCAs, you know, somebody who whipped up a pistol and started shooting people, and those kinds of rifts prevail when there's an atmosphere of division that's there, and it's said the house divided, you know, will always be conquered again, to my first point. The third one, which is critical for a presidency, is that it's sending a message, and this is very unfortunate, and the president needs to rein in this particular situation for this reason. It's sending a message that the president is not somebody who works with other people.
How so?
Because in the first instance, he was deputizing another president, and there was a rift, and it went so bad that, you know, it was non-functional. Many people say it is just the constitution that prevented him from stepping out of power. Now he's the one in power, and he's the one calling the shots. And again, the same situation is happening. So it does create an impression that, you know, he's a difficult person to work with. It may not necessarily be the truth, but now that becomes a perception. Like my brother already said, some of this is at subordinate level. So you have all these players that are, some are direct subordinates, some are, let's call them interests. All these people that surround the presidency, some are advisors, you know, some are minions, some are pawns, some are, you know, the people who speak when he doesn't want to speak. That whole collective group of subordinates who are out there throwing stones and speaking badly, the problem that now portends is that leadership starts at the top and it stops at the top. The buck stops with the president. So it is perceived that the longer this runs out, or, you know, the longer this plays out, it's perceived that he's actually supporting it and allowing it to happen, and allowing his minions to, you know, to perpetuate this situation. The problem with that is that as long as that is happening, and since the buck stops with him, it does show, you know, poor leadership, unfortunately. The worst thing for it, which is also an opportunity, is that Kenya is now, we had a hopeful segue or shift towards issue-based politics, where people were ready to hear leaders, and especially this time when the economics have been so brutal that every single citizen can feel it in their pocket. The Kenyan citizen is ready for issue-based politics, where the leaders articulate their portfolios, articulate their policies, articulate their manifestos based on politics, not of issues, based on merit, not tribe. Yeah. But you see, this particular issue, if you look at it, it has a lot of tribal overtones. There's suddenly this whole Mount Kenya versus Rift Valley thing. You're seeing, you know, the usual, you know, I'm trying to find a decent word to call some of these, you know, rabble rousers who will always be there to talk a lot of nonsense, and yet it's a lot, very serious issues on both sides. So what happens is that this is poisoning the transition of Kenya to an issue-based politics and dividing Kenyans back to their tribal cocoons and tribal corners. It failed the last time, and people should have noticed that it was midwifing a new era. So now what will happen is, I can predict that people will either have to shape up, that Kenyans are now looking at leaders by merit and not necessarily by tribe, and that's why you see the major tribal groupings always getting divided almost on a 50-50 basis. But now I predict that those who will be on the wrong side of things, who will want to hold on to that, you know, politics of tribe, will get surpassed just like last time, and people will be shocked when expectations that this particular tribe that had many numbers would prevail. So I would advise the leadership to start looking more at issue-based politics. Start fomenting a merit-based political system in Kenya. Stop this nonsense of political, you know, tribalism, which has so damaged. My brother kind of, you know, spoke to it. It has damaged this country for such a long time that it's a high time the leaders step out of it. So this issue of Mount Kenya this, Rift Valley that, you know, Western Kenya this, it's bypassed, and the leaders need to shape up to it. I suspect the citizens have already shifted, and what these leaders will find is the same surprise that happened in the last election, that Kenyans have actually got to a point where they do not tolerate a lot of this tribal politics. The final point I'll say is, for the two leaders themselves, they need to sit down together and iron this out. The longer it plays out in public, it's not a good demonstration of their leadership capabilities. They can stand up and, you know, blow smoke and, you know, kind of gaslight and say, oh, we have a loving, amicable relationship. But, you know, perception is sometimes in politics is more important than reality. What people perceive and see, ultimately they gauge it as reality, and the trappings of power seems to have made people forget the rough journey they took to get here, and somebody needs to remind them that, hey, history does repeat itself, and if you don't learn from the mistakes of the past, your own and others, then you'll end up in the same situation, and Kenyans will get rid of you as fast as they chose you.
Now, Murede, as you'll be adding on to that as well, as you know, you've said it is playing out at the subordinate level, because you're looking at the chairperson of the Council of Governors, Anne Waiguru, seemingly has already taken a side. You're looking at MP Oscar Sudi, who's already taken a side already. Nyeri County Governor, that is Mutahi Kahiga, who has also taken a side already. And so it falls back to, is this the return of Keleweke and Tangatanga once again, but in a different language or in a different name?
Seemingly, we would like to take it back to Keleweke Tangatanga as the narrative of the moment. But I must say that there has always been factions that are differing. In any government setting that has always been there, there has been. Look at 2002. We had the difference that came in as a result of the MOU.
So what we're seeing now is normal.
So, right, it's very normal in politics. It's very normal. Once you don't get your cake as you soon as you expected, or the way you expected it to come, definitely you begin to, you know, pursue it using other tactics. Now, I think I want to demystify something. Is just, you know, actually he's drawn from the perception of many that His Excellency the President does not work with people. Is not somebody you can work with. But I can say this: in 2012, 2013, all the way to 2017, when the president, who hailed from Mount Kenya, was being blamed for, you know, laxity. The president, the current president, then deputy president, was actually working in defense of the image of a government they had already constituted under TNA umbrella. Now, TNA URP umbrella. Now, what you're trying to say here is that come 2017, 2018, definitely every leader would like to have things aligning towards what they had already initiated to be carried on and maybe completed if their term will have elapsed. Like what you saw, 2008, 2009, I think, that's when Michuki declared Uhuru Kenyatta in the Mount Kenya region as the kingpin, as the man to watch, as the man to follow. He was addressing members of his community. And I'd like to educate him a bit, not that you don't know, not that you don't know. Maybe using the word educate sometimes for someone feel like I'm belittling. I'm not belittling. What I'm trying to say is, when it comes to human beings, and even animals, we have the tendency of getting back to our backyard, going back to our people we identify with. Even God himself, he has created people he calls my people, my children. But they are people he's calling his own sons. That's for heirship, is another level. So what you're saying, we're not getting into that one for now. But what I'm trying to say is that even in the scriptures, you still have tribes. What I'm trying to say is, belonging to a certain community with a very positive attitude will actually not be a reason for me to hate somebody from another community or belittle another person from the other community. I should develop an attitude that loves and respects each other, because we are all humans, irrespective of our background. Because each one of us have a background. The people who really demonized, oh, being a Kikuyu is a problem, being a Luo is a problem, being a Kalenjin is a problem, being a Luya is a problem, is actually currently fighting with race. And I'm talking about people like Americans. I'm talking about the British who are fighting with class. I'm talking about Indians with caste system. I'm talking about Somalia with family differences. I mean, every community has got a way that they have been, compiled. And if you come to Kenya, we have the tribes. And let me tell you, before our civil society and the West did this so effectively to demonize where you come from, there is no problem with where you come from. All that you need to do is deep down in yourself, purpose and decide to love and respect one another. Whether it's somebody from Turkana to respect somebody from the coast, it's a decision, personal decision. Can we campaign over this platform and ensure that people are uniting on the basis of general on that general understanding, rather than using that political narrative that had been created, that I should begin now to hate myself from the community I came from and assume that there's a community called Kenyan. Kenyan community is formed by people who understand and love one another. People will exercise patriotism and love for that same country. So that is where we should be taking our politics. The hit that is there between Rigathi Gachagua, we don't say that when you're campaigning, it makes sense when you go to your people. They call them my people. They go to their people to canvass for votes and bring them on the table. Then the other guy goes to the other side. But after the cake has been baked and is now on the table, now that's where we say nobody comes with plastic forks on this table. Okay, it must be golden, it must be like this, begin to give conditions. It didn't work like that from the beginning. So when we begin to lose touch with the basics, that's the time you see this kind of hit coming around. I think what he has just said is very correct. Let the president deal with this issue soonest possible, if this is not his tune.
Yeah. All right.
Could be his melody, his song.
Okay.
Yeah.
As we wind up this segment, Kinute, what is the end goal for Rigathi Gachagua? What does he intend to achieve by having this discussion and warning Rift Valley leaders and speaking about the 1 man 1 vote 1 shilling? What is the end goal for that matter? For any time a leader, particularly parties that have come into power together, having this sort of tips, what is always the end goal?
So the first thing, I appreciate my brother educating us. This is, in leadership, there's zero tolerance for negative and toxic tribalism, and I'll say why. The tribalism, or the tribal aspects that we should celebrate are those that bring us together as a country, which means I am Kikuyu and I'm proud of it. But when I go into any leadership stage, I don't tout my Kikuyu-ness as what qualifies me. It prevents us from this demagogical perspective of my person needs to be in power. We had a Kikuyu in power, now we need a Luya, now we need a Luo, now we need a Kalenjin. Think of it in corporate terms. Imagine if our corporate executives used to rotate based on tribal basis. The last CEO was a Kikuyu, now we need a Luya. There's no tolerance for that. So what I'm talking about is negative tribalism that does not bring Kenyans together, but pulls them aside, polarizes them into tribal cocoons, and everybody takes their corners. And then, I mean, we've seen the worst of it during the post-election violence. People take up, tribe as a reason to harm the other person. So tribe is important, where you come from is important. That's your foundation. That's what makes you who you are. That's what aligns your culture. That's what aligns your family. That's what aligns where you come from. It gives you the strength that you now need to come forward and present yourself for leadership. However, once you get onto the stage, we need to do it by merit. Kenyans have suffered enough because of electing people on the basis of tribe. And if we haven't learned our lesson, then we deserve some of what we are going through presently. And the point I was making is Kenyans have gone through enough that now they will be less and less tolerant of this negative tribal politics that pulls people aside. And if any tribal aspect is there, let it be positive, that brings people together. However, for leadership, we need the best people leading the country, not just the country, but the counties, all the demarcated, the constituencies and such. To directly answer your question, in politics, as my brother here said, everybody has their strategic interest, and most of the time they're in the pocket. They haven't really shown their card. So sometimes what's being said in public is very different from the cards that are being played at the back. He made a point, which is true, that leaders will always have issues. In fact, if you go to the history of this country, there's always some chemistry and dance between presidents and their vice presidents. But this is what shows a president's leadership, the ability to keep it in check so that it doesn't blow out of proportion. Right now, which is the last thing I'll say about this, Kenyans are going through so much that they won't be very tolerant to pettiness in terms of politics. When it gets to a point where it's looking petty and people have the luxury of dividing Kenyans and playing all this tribal politics and spending days, not even hours, discussing this thing that can easily be sorted in backroom, boardroom negotiations. So going forward, I think nobody can really tell what the end game is for both sides. You can hear hints of it. You can hear some of it has to do with the transition to the next presidency. Some of it, as my brother said, has something to do with the kingpinship of the different regions and factions. And some of it just has to do with the different interests and players, like he said. Some people who finance elections, others who stakeholders in different ways, now staking their claim. Now that the trappings of power and whatever economics come with it are playing real time, we are seeing some of those alignments on those terms. Who knows where the original issue came from? Because there's always an issue of origin. There's a root cause. There's where it started. There's rumors of where this one started. But again, they remain rumors as long as the two principals themselves, the president and his deputy, don't sit down and iron it out and quickly get rid of it, so that it doesn't now become what we talk about every day.
Right. So, gentlemen, I'd love to shift this conversation away from Ruto, Gachagua, Tiff, and let's stay with Ruto and what he was up to the whole of last week. He had a 5-day state visit of the United States, met US President Joe Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, amongst other leaders, went with an entourage of various government officials to the US. Now, he came back with quite a lot of bag of goodies, you would term it. He's jetted back with about 52 billion shillings as a lump sum money of what he's benefited, or at least what the country expects to benefit. About 5.3 billion shillings, has been allocated to democracy, human rights, and governance from the United States. About 93 million shillings to support operationalization of Public Benefits Organization Act. We also have about, 66 million shillings to the Kenyan education sector, 929 million shillings in partnership to strengthen modernization and the professionalization of Kenya's police service. There's also the fight against corruption. The country has been boosted by 66 million shillings and much more, including 16 US helicopters, 150 armored vehicles. And so President jetted back on Saturday. But what seems to have overshadowed this particular trip is just how he got to the United States. And that is, there's a private jet that he hired. There's also an entourage of the people that he went with, and just the lump sum that is likely to be paid for that trip by the taxpayer. And so, Muito, was this really the goal? It wasn't to, it wasn't a question of how did I get to the United States. In fact, when he got back, that was one of the first things he had to address, and not just what are some of these benefits that he got back to the country. So, as you said, perception really matters, contrary to reality. We don't know whether that was the initial, amount that was allocated for this trip, but this kind of perspective, even on international space, that a president used a private jet to get to the United States, cost the taxpayer this, is that what should be achieved, really?
Well, with such engagement, the president is not traveling alone. Whenever he gets into traveling and for, engaging with a government, there are many ministries that are involved.
Yeah.
So ministries and departments, they're involved. They may not be mentioned. They may not be in the same plane. Some must have used actually different planes. So it's not only this one that we're seeing, the jet itself. And again, it's always important. Sometimes, let's see, I have seen so many people going to the market or purchase a new suit, yet that person has been wearing a suit simply because you want to impress and maybe obtain what you want, or maybe
are we impressing America?
Not impression in that form. The other day we suffered a blow in the military when we lost the chief of staff, and due to some form of maybe negligence, we would say. But when we come now to the president, he's now traveling, and this is still hovering over him. He feels, safety must be there. The weather is very uncertain. Our small presidential jet cannot take him to the US. So much as we would like to save, we may not save. We would get a plane or a transportation means that will actually very sure that will get him there and bring him back, because he's going to do good business or to do business with the US, and that is what he went to do. And you see, much of what has been spoken about in the local dailies is differing from what maybe the American dailies are reported about the deals. And you see, like I've always said, the local dailies sometimes report as per their political interest, because our media is not as neutral as they profess to be. They are biased, some of them. And the problem is that even those who have major audience, they'll do that. Even the dailies, which that they have a reading, an audience, they will report what they want to be heard. So they will talk about a few things. But if you go to again the international, which also was in the same reporting room, they will tell you will begin to see lots of goodies that are deals that the president signed, and some of them is not that he was to come back with briefcase.